Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it's Thursday. It's August 1st. We're starting a new month. July's behind us. We're going into the fall where things will probably pick up. Volume was really high the last couple of days. It's extreme volatility today. Uh, this is a very unusual day. It's very rare that you see a trend this strong that suddenly turns and goes down just as strong, if not stronger. Um, Now they blame this reversal here on something Trump said about the tariffs or something. Um, so who knows? Oftentimes I think they just write the news to fit the price action. So it's kind of unclear exactly what happened. But regardless, we had a nice strong trend. This is a strong trend up that just suddenly reversed, and it's just as strong back down. Didn't really wasn't that surprising in here because you would expect it to come back to this trend line eventually. But it shot through that trend line and it was off to the races, and it was just downhill all day long. So there's so many trades here. There's more. It's just more than enough trades here, and a lot of these sell-off trades you would have, or especially early on, you would have caught some big runners. So um, I mean, if you caught any of these moves, it's doubtful you even trading this afternoon, unless you were just trying to. This can really trip up some people. This is why I like to scalp out and hold a runner, because if you're holding a bunch of contracts and suddenly this thing starts falling, you give everything back in a blink. And I just hate that. There's nothing I hate worse than seeing a nice profit on my trade only to watch it evaporate. And that's why I usually just exit and look for a new, take my money and maybe hold a runner on a strong trend like on this up or this down just in case. But otherwise, I like to take my money and get out. And even a runner, if we start, breaking a trend line or midline or EMA or something, especially from here to here is a nice distance. So you don't want to give all that back, hoping that it bounces here again, which usually it should, but it didn't today. So sorry, I had a little interruption there. But this is very unusual to see the market rally this strongly and then sell off this strong. Usually a trend like this just keeps going, or if it's going down like this, it just keeps going. And you see, once we started down today, um, if I can get over there, I can't even get to the end of it. It's so much. I mean, even after 2 o'clock, there's still a lot of price action here. But we just kind of went sideways. But you can see, we even continued lower here into the after hours, and this thing actually broke out of the bigger two-tier channel here, but it still continued to go down. And that's what happens usually on strong trend days. It just, the selling starts and it doesn't end, or the buying starts and it doesn't really end. So it was kind of unusual to see this kind of buying early on, only to see it just fall off the map. So, and there's so many trades here. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly because there's a lot of them. And when you get a trend like this, this is a very strong trend. It's looking really strong right here. But by the time it gets to here, this is a very strong trend. And the way you know is that the corrections are very shallow. Of course, this is a little bigger, but notice how we're not getting back to the midline or the trend line. It just finds new trend lines up here, little smaller ones, shorter term ones. And there's even some shorter term ones up right through here. You can see that little short-term trend, and then you got one that corrects right here. I mean, the chart just gets so, there's so many little trends and short-term trends and things, and the chart just gets really cluttered up, so I'm trying not to put them all on there. But I put the main ones on here, the ones that count, really. But you can see, so when you see this, you're not going to get big opportunities. So if you get a second entry, especially if you get a secondary trend line like this, if prices come back to it and you get a good setup, take it, because you're just not going to get a lot of big corrections until it finally decides to come back to the trend line, which is what was going on here. And notice how we bounced right there at the trend line, but suddenly this thing failed and it was just off the map. And this is a spike in channel. Somebody asked me a question about, I think they call it a spiking channel, but I'm not saying it's not spiking. It's spike and a channel, basically. Spike and channel. is what I'm saying. So what that is prices don't usually, your channels start at the high or the low, but it didn't start up here. Like here, your channel starts at the very low and works higher. But in this case, what happens in the spike in channel, prices will either spike up and go into a channel or spike down. But notice what happens right here. We spike down and go into this big two-tiered channel. And notice how weak this is. Prices can't even come back to the trend line. They're getting through the EMA, or I'm sorry, yeah, well, the EMA a little bit and the midline, but they can't even hardly get back to the trend line. And then even when they do, just a new trend line establishes at a little higher level, and off it goes again. And that's a serious, strong trend. There are the one thing about a big downtrend like this is you will see a lot of times you'll see some big spike ups in the buys. Everybody's trying to pick bottom, so they start seeing it moving and they jump in, and then they realize, no, we're going lower, and they all jump out again, and it shoots down again. So very interesting day. You don't see many days like this. It's kind of unusual. But I'm going to run through these trades real quick. We're going to wrap up the day. We're going to wrap up the week. No chart lessons on Fridays. And we'll be back again to do it on Monday. But it's kind of an unusual day. So 7 o'clock came right in here in this little move. At this point, we're rallying up, but you've really already got 2 legs up, and you're swinging back and forth above and below the EMA. So when you get this little reversal pattern, I did draw the trend line off these highs, and originally I had it a little lower, but once we shot on down here, I moved it down here, and I believe that to be the right spot. Generally, it's going to be off the low in the first swing, but you found this one really off the highs. But anyway, you got this little reversal, and you figure we're just coming to here. So when you get this failed second entry long that pushed through here, pulls back, gives you that big bearish bar. I like going short there. And you actually get a second entry here. I marked this one green because it's such a big bar, but notice that low, and you get a first entry, and you come up here and you get a second entry. And really your high is on this little 2-bar matching low, but that's such a nice bar. You might let it break lower and drop a limit order in. If you'd got too aggressive, you'd have missed that little trade. But it's still a good setup, but it's not perfect. There's a lot of congestion right there. But the reason you're getting that congestion is the buying's been so, there's been a lot of buying, and the bias is somewhat up, and so people are trying to buy, but it's just it's just not time to buy yet. The correction's not over. But you do get a little close outside here. This actually should be over here like this. You can see the close outside, the drop to a new low, and it bounces right. If you drew this line and just drug it down to the bottom, it bounces right at it. You can see the closes come in there right on the line. And it's tempting to buy here. This is one you could mark. You could mark this green because you may catch an important low. And lo and behold, that would have been a great. If you catch that low and you catch a runner right there, maybe 2, and you might be able to ride this thing all the way up. At least up here until we hit the other side, I would have, until you get a major trend line up through here that gets a close outside, you might have exit here, but then you get another couple of chances to re-enter and keep going. Like I said, I like to exit and re-enter. But anyway, you make a new low. There's actually a failed second entry short here. You might go long right there. That's a possibility. I wasn't sure since that was an inside bar and that's such a big bearish bar. Inside bars can be so iffy. But you might enter above this since it is a trap. But you notice it didn't fool many people, but it comes back again, and it probably trapped some people here. Now look at it shoot up. This was the better place to enter. I like entering there. Plus, it did confirm this little shorter term trend line. And we worked up here. We just kept making new highs and higher highs and higher lows, but you're not getting any second entries really up through here. You might have considered one here, but I was a little concerned with that little bit of overshoot. We may push up right here and turn down, and that's what it looks like it's going to do, but then it bounces again. But when it bounced again off that trend line and gives you that fairly bullish bar, you just about have to go long. You have to consider this is a strong trend. And again, it looks like it's going to correct and come back to the trend line, but it just keeps pushing higher. And you come back here, you bounce again, pull back, and so when it actually makes a little double bottom there. And so this is basically a second entry long, pull back first entry, then it comes back again. It actually does break lower one tick right there and then turns back up. So when it went higher there, that's a second entry. And I'd go long there and look at it go. It's actually tempting to go long right there because you just get a little double test. You make that low, you test it once, you come back and test it again, and it takes off. So you're going long into the high of the day, but this is a strong trend, and this is just a midline, and everything's holding above it, so it may take off again. So you make a high, come back first entry, pull back, and it breaks lower and turns and goes out the other side on the second entry. There's another good place to enter. And you really could have looked at this as a failed second entry short. It actually broke higher and turned down first though. But when it went back higher again, you could have actually entered there. I'll mark it at least green. And then it actually comes back again here. Only problem I didn't like with this one is you got a big bearish bar, another inside bar, and yet another inside bar. But it's a strong trend, and you could actually look at this as a low, and that is a failed second entry short. So that's another one. I mean, there's a lot of trades I didn't even mark in here. There's so many good trades. Why risk going long way up here when wait for it to come back and get back to the EMA and correct again. So finally comes back right here. You make a new swing low, and you try to go lower once, twice, and it fails. I like going long right there. There's actually a second entry long when it broke a lot higher here, but that's not a very good signal bar. I like going long, and we just came off the top, so I don't like entering here, even though it's still continuing to make higher highs and higher lows. This little short-term trend line is played out by the time it gets here, and notice it's not long before it turns down. And there's actually a failed second entry long there, but it's right into the EMA. It's the first break of this trend line, so there's a chance we could bounce off this bigger channel midline and go higher. Notice it actually does go higher here, but I'm not crazy about buying in here yet. It's just hard to know what's going on right here. The odds are we could be going down, and we're not really having any luck going higher again. It looked like we may take off one more time here, but that could just be the middle of the pattern, and you may get a measured leg down. That's what you would be thinking here at this point, because you're definitely not expecting this big sell-off on a day like this. And you can see where that puts you right back to this trend line. And so when it comes back here, you're just looking for a good entry, but you never get one. And I actually like going short right here. Normally I wouldn't mark a short on a day like this, but this is a trap right here. Notice you're coming down, you get a first entry and you get a second entry, and it's not going anywhere, and it actually breaks higher above that nice bullish bar. Let me make that a little bigger. And it turns down instantly. When it turns down instantly and goes out the other side, there's longs trapped there and you got plenty of room to get out before it gets back to this trend line, even if it's going to bounce. So I like that one. It's close to being green because generally you won't see many shorts on a day like this, but after that nice leg down and then that correction, and you're working on another one with your target being down here, you may take it. And there's actually a first entry long right there that fails, but you can't go short into that trend line with this strong trend. And there's actually a failed second entry long right here. I didn't mark it. It's a long way away from the EMA, and you would expect prices to try to retest the high on a day like this, but you could argue for that one. I'll at least make it green. Like I said, there's probably going to be some trades in there that you could argue to take, but I'm only going to mark the really good ones because there's just so many really good ones. And you're just working lower, and finally you come back, you get a first entry, and then you get a second entry here. I actually marked this one. This is your signal bar technically, but that's such a nice bearish bar, and it is, if you drew that trend line off those first two, it is kind of conforming. It is a second entry, and it's the first break of this trend line right here, so we're probably going to go lower. You may wait on this one. This one you could probably argue for it to be green right here, but I like that trade. just going short right there. But you may wait on this lower high, and this actually broke higher and turned and went out the other side. You could have your stop one tick below the green bar, or you could wait for that one to finish and put your sell stop right there. Either way. And now you may look for another leg as a minimum target. That's going to be my first leg right there. In case we're going to make 2 legs down, and you see where that target is. That's right down there where we started finding support before it went lower yet again. So that would have been a great target. First line target right there. And then all of a sudden we're moving down. There's another little chance right there, but I'd wait for it to correct and come back. And then you get a 2-legged pullback right to the EMA, and you kind of get a repeat pattern. This is really your signal bar, but this has been such a down, this is starting to be a strong downtrend, so you got to take that second entry right there when it broke lower. And there's plenty of room to get out. And there's a lower high here, but that's right into a double bottom. And then you got a failure here, but we're getting away from the EMA. Wait for it to correct and come back. Notice what happens. You get a first entry, come back up here, you get a second entry, a little small bar. It's not a perfectly bearish bar, but I'm going to take that second entry right there. Prices are just pulling back for this. You hadn't quite got your target yet. It's a downtrend. I'm going to take every second entry probably. There's even another little second entry right here, but you don't have a lot of room to get out. I don't know if you could have got out of that one. You might have tried it anyway. You might have at least let it come back here and entered and then had enough room to get out. But it bounces. But notice what happens. You come back first entry and you get another second entry. And so you don't have much room for this low. So the only way I would enter this one was to get my sell stop 1 tick below that original bar. So you might let this break lower and then drop your limit order in there, or either let this one break lower below this bar and hope it comes back. But I don't think it would have come back and filled you. You would have only made it in on this one. But I'd be still, even though this has been a strong downtrend, I'm going to be a little leery about getting short if I don't have enough room to scalp out before hitting this support right here. This time it doesn't matter. It just shoots right through. And then we start correcting. And where it is, you get look what happens. You're coming up, you get a first entry, and then you get this big bearish bar second entry right off that main trend line. I'm going to enter there. Even though that trend line's not broke, on a day like this, I'm going to probably enter there. You could have waited on this one, and you actually would have had to wait on this little lower high here. That's probably the better trade, but I'd be afraid I'm going to miss this one with it being right off the key entry point. I'm going to probably take it, especially that bearish of a bar on a second entry. But I wouldn't even be afraid to add on here, because you wouldn't have scalped out here, and you could just double up right there. And you see how quickly you would have been out. It does pull back again here and give you a failure. And I think there's enough there to scalp out, but I probably wouldn't take that one. I don't know. That one, you could argue for that one too. Only problem I have with that one, let me get this marked, and is you got 3 bars stacking up and you got a 2-bar matching low. When this broke higher, it should have went on through, and it didn't. And so, that's a little bit concerning. You may come back to the trend line one more time. It doesn't even get back there. It comes back and just makes a double top. And this is a double top, so now you can look at that as a failure. That's a fairly small bearish bar, another low risk entry, and off it goes again. And of course it comes back here, and you could call this a failed second entry long and all, but I would wait. I'd want a correction each time. This thing's been going a while. You've already met your target here on your measured move, so I'm gonna start to get a little more conservative here. Again, there's actually 2 legs back here. There's a hidden second entry. I wouldn't be afraid to take that, I'll be honest with you, but I didn't mark it. I'll go ahead and mark it green. You could argue for it to be red, though. I mean, this thing just keeps going lower. You get a lower high here, but not a very good signal bar. So I'm going to wait. And then notice what happens. You get a pullback, you make a low, first entry, and you get another second entry here. And it does kind of confirm that next trend line, but that's not a very good signal bar. I'd probably wait for the next one. So when it breaks lower, you get that big, you actually could have entered on either one of these. I'm not sure which way it broke first. That's the problem. If it broke lower and you went short on that first one, you might have got stopped out only to see it go exactly where you're thinking it's going to go. So if I did enter on this one, I may put my stop one tick above that just to make sure that doesn't happen to you. But generally, you'd want to let these bars finish and then let it break lower. I'm not sure what happened there. You get a failure here in a big bearish bar, so that'd probably be the better entry. But you can see we got another little, and this is kind of a repeat of what we had right in here. You can see it. And we're coming back to the trend line, but we're finding this support across here, as you can see. And I'd just be a little bit leery of entering right in there after a break, and we've already had a new low in place. There's a chance we're going to rally soon. I mean, this has been a huge sell-off. And but that's a lower high, and then you got a failed second entry long. You still got room there, but once you're starting to get in here, starting to get dicey. We do get a little bit of what looks like a trap and a lower high and a second entry short right here. Notice that new low, first entry, and it tries to go higher and turns and goes right out the other side. I'd probably take that one because now you've pushed through here. This is the third time. This is probably going to trap some people. And then it bounces. But notice what happens. You make that high, you try to go higher once, twice, that far away from the EMA, that bearish bar. I'm going to take that one. There's a lower high here, but you're right at that EMA. It's getting close to 2 o'clock. You know, that one would have worked still, but I probably, when it made the failure on the third time here, and this is still just at 2 o'clock, so you could, especially when it broke higher and went out the other side, I'd probably take that one too. So, I mean, there's just so many trades here, and I know I went through those quickly, but there's just so many trades. You know, you're just following the rules, basically. Every second entry, you know, the key here on a big trend like this is generally, if you've pushed too far away from the EMA too long, unless you have a trap, a real strong, obvious trap to the upside, since we're going down here, or unless you've come back to the EMA, I would wait. You want to see it come back to the EMA, the midline, or the trend line when you start to get, this is an example, when you start to get way down in here, you want it to come back. Same thing here. It starts to get way down in here, let it come back. Same thing here. Gets way down in here, let it come back. Don't, even though you see you can usually get short down in here, eventually you're going to get caught being too far away from the EMA and too far into the move, and you're going to get burned when if you'll just be patient, it's going to come back again and give you another chance to get in. Same thing going up. This was so strong we didn't come back to anything but the short-term trend lines. So well, it did come back to the EMA a good bit in here though, so that's the difference. Where here you had to wait on it to come back a few times. So this trend doesn't look quite as strong as this one did. Notice how the corrections are very shallow here, where these are getting some pretty good corrections. But you'll see that in a downtrend. People are just looking to catch the bottom more than they do the top, because it really rallies off some of these low points. And and that's probably what happens. And plus, people are nervous here. This thing's selling off, and they're making some quick, easy money, and so they all start exiting to get their profit before it evaporates, like we talked about earlier. And it's not real clear. It just generally you want to play everything off this key entry point, but if you try to do that, you're not going to get many entries because it's just too weak. You can't hardly get back there. And even when it did, right in here, notice that even once you had a break and a new low in place, it just established another shorter term trend line here that still kept holding. And it did that here, and It did it again over here. And even in the after hours, we're still working another trend line down. And so you may have to replay you may have to redraw some shorter term trend lines. Look at those trend lines playing. It's playing down that trend line all the way down. And you'll see that. So anyway, it was an interesting day. If you got thrown off here, I mean, that's not a common pattern to see a trend up that strong and a trend down that strong unless something odd happens. And every now and then something odd does happen. And that's the beauty of day trading is that, if you're following the rules, you're not going to lose much. You would have got stopped out way up here if you were still long. I mean, if you're waiting till it's down in here to exit, then you're not following the rules, and that's why you're going to get burned. I never will forget one time I had a guy that was following what we were doing, and he was struggling, and he finally said, "This don't work," and he left. And wasn't long after that they had a big reversal like this, and it sold off like this, and he wrote me back some email, "Ha ha ha! I'm sure y'all lost your shirts today," which I never understood. It's obvious he didn't even understand the rules, because if you're following the rules, you're never going to get caught in anything like this, because you would have had your stop below the last swing low, and the most you're going to lose is your couple of points. And if it's real volatile and you got a lot of big bars, even if you're playing that, the most you might lose would be 3 or 4 points. You're not going if you're hanging on while this is going down, you're not following the rules, and you deserve to watch your account evaporate and probably get wiped out. That's why we have the rules in place. And but on a strong trend like this, you don't have very many big corrections, and you certainly, even though it's very high volatility, there's no big bars in there. You're not even having to fight the big bar syndrome that a lot of times you do. You usually have that more. Now, there are some bigger bars going down here, but notice any of these key points where you had a second entry, your trade rarely, this is probably about the only one that took any heat right here, and maybe one of these entries might have taken a little bit of heat. Most of them don't even take any heat. Once you're in, it's quick and over, and you scalped out, and you're taking a runner in just a few seconds. Half a minute at the most. So, yeah, it just tickled me when the guy sent me. He was just so bitter because he couldn't learn how to trade, and he's laughing, thinking that, trying to say we got our shirts handed to us, and if you followed the rules, you still made money that day. That's what was so comical about it. I probably had one of my best days ever, and he's sending me an email laughing, trying to rub somebody's nose in it because he was a failure. And I mean, that just happens, and people get bitter, and some people just can't do it. And most of the time it's because they're not patient, they have unrealistic expectations, and they're not following the rules. You do those things, you're never going to be successful as a day trader. This is all about, first you got to learn the strategy, but then the real key is discipline and having that intestinal fortitude, as I like to call it. I've been able to follow the rules at any cost, even when you have to watch something like this. If you didn't enter here, you probably had to watch this go without you till here. And if you didn't enter here or here, you had to watch this go without you till here. And that's what some people cannot do. They'll see this going down here. They'll see that, and finally right here they say, "I can't stand it no more," and they enter, and it reverses and it stops them out. And then a few minutes later, it's racing exactly where they thought it was going to go before. But they can't be patient, and they can't wait, and they can't watch the thing move without them. So anyway, I hope that's helpful to you. I hope you had a good trading day. Hopefully this didn't, I mean, if this confused you up here, don't worry. Even I was confused. So, I mean, this would confuse anybody, but you just sit tight and wait till it's not confusing, and then you get on. If you notice, I've got one good trade. The only reason I like that one is because it was a trap. I didn't know, I was scared to go long, but when I realized it was a trap and it was going to at least come back to this trend line, I would want to ride that back. But really, from about here all the way down to here, even I wasn't sure what was going on, so I'm just sitting and watching. And notice there's no trades really marked in there except a couple of green ones. And that's the key, is that you just have to be able to sit and be patient. And then suddenly, once you realize what's going on, look at all the opportunity. But if you're sitting here trying to buy this all the way down, you're just losing all the way down. Just be patient. Be patient. Have that intestinal fortitude to be able to sit there and watch it make a big move like that without you, knowing that you'll get your opportunity in a little bit, and then look at what the rest of the day brought. I mean, it was obvious you were selling. You may not have known, even if you didn't know where to sell here, you knew, or you should know, I'm selling this thing. I mean, that's pretty obvious. So the key is to figure out and learn when and where to sell. So, and this wasn't quite as obvious because it was so weak it couldn't get back to the trend line or the key entry point, which is where you usually want to enter. But remember, midlines and EMAs are key entry points as well. So if you get that second entry in a strong downtrend at the EMA, like this, take it. Anyway, that's 30 minutes worth today. Probably 20 minutes more than I like it to be, but there's a lot to talk about today. So really great day. Really topped off the week. So I hope it was good for you. If nothing else, hopefully you learned something. Even if you have a bad trading day on a day like this, that's the key. Don't make sure you learn from it. And that's another reason trading takes so long, because it'll lull you to sleep. You'll get used to all those crazy range days, and the market's not doing much. It's not going anywhere. The volatility's low, and it'll lull you to sleep. And you'll think you got it, it's easy, and then all of a sudden it does this and it throws you completely off. Well, it takes a long time to see all the things the market can throw at you. And so that's one reason it takes a long time to learn this. So don't, when you see a day like this and it throws you off, if it does, don't let it bother you. Just say, hey, that was a great learning opportunity, and I got to see the market throw something new at me. Because this is a rare day, I'll be honest with you. I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again next week. Hope you have a great weekend. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.